Jerry Garcia said, "Somebody's got to do something, and it's just incredibly pathetic that it has to be us." Relentless, commonly defined as oppressively constant, determined, showing no abatement of severity, intensity, strength, or pace. I believe relentless is an ethos. You're not stopping until you get what you want. You're not taking no for an answer. No obstacle will deter you from your goals. Relentless mentality is where we get to tap into the mindset of change agents, leaders, and icons. My hope is that their stories will inspire and motivate others to transform their mentality in their profession, their personal life, and ultimately their communities. So remember, when it's tough, will you give up or will you be relentless? So happy to have Dr. Woodrow Myers, Chief Medical Officer and Chief Healthcare Strategist of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona. Welcome to the show, Dr. Myers.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to try to read through your bio quickly. You have done so many things, and I earlier told him he's a healthcare hero in my mind. So you're nationally recognized for his involvement in quality initiatives for patient care and healthcare management programs. You've held the role of Executive Vice President and CMO at Anthem, Director of Healthcare Management at the Ford Motor Company, Health Commissioner for both the state of Indiana and New York City. You received your Doctor of Medicine degree from Harvard, as well as your MBA and bachelor's degree from Stanford. You've held numerous teaching positions at Cornell, University of California, San Francisco, University of Michigan, Wayne State, and Indiana University, and have had several medical and community service awards, such as National Medical Fellowship, Distinguished Alumni Award, Outstanding Service Award from the National Medical Association, and the U.S. Public Health Service Award presented by the former U.S. Surgeon General C. Everett Koop. You've also been published several times as well. So, Dr. Myers, we're super happy to have you on the show, and kind of wanted you to start off talking about your background. Where are you from and how you got into medicine?
Sure.
Just giving us this kind of overview.
Be happy to. And again, thanks for having me. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana, and grew up there and went to grade school there and to high school there, and grew up across the street from the only inner city golf course in Indianapolis, and have never played a round of golf in my entire life. I'm one of the few physicians I know that doesn't play golf. But I started off the entrepreneurial business side pretty early because there was a fence that was right near our yard, and frequently the golfers who were Saturday morning duffers that didn't practice a lot would hit the ball over the fence into our yard. And so my brother and I had a business where we would sell their own golf ball back to them for 10, 25 cents. And we, over time, figured out that a Titleist was worth more than an off-brand. So we had a sort of price range. And if the guy didn't want to buy his ball back from us, we dropped it back where we found it, and he'd have to walk a block and a half around and then walk a block and a half back. So that was sort of my first entrepreneurial venture.
Okay.
But with respect to medicine, I kind of stumbled into it in the sense that I didn't know that as a young child that's what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a captain in the United States Marine Corps because my dad had been in the Army, and you got to be better, quote unquote, than your dad. So I thought, well, the Marines are better than the Army guys, aren't they? So I'm going to be a Marine. And my dad had been a sergeant, so I needed to be a captain. And so, and why not a general? Because as I understood the world of the military, captains actually led men into battle where generals sat in offices and pushed papers. So I was going to be a captain in the Marine Corps. And at this time, it was the Vietnam War. And that was what was frequently on television every night, and we watched the news, Walter Cronkite and Huntley Brinkley report every single night. So I'm in high school. I'm not quite old enough yet to join. And the guy sitting beside me, I'll never forget it, his name was Tom Nolan. He was kind of a hippie, great guy, and I were talking about what we wanted to do when we wanted to grow up. It was in Mr. Henderson's history class, and I remember exactly where I was sitting and where he was sitting. And I told him I wanted to go to Vietnam and I wanted to kill. And he looked at me like I was crazy. He was a good guy, friend, and he said, "Why do you want to do that, man?" And I said, I never really thought it through before. I said, okay, well, let me think about that. He said, "Why don't you save people instead?" And it was
Wow.
at that moment in time that I said, oh, that's not a bad idea. Why don't I think about it? And that was really a seminal moment in this little 14-year-old brain of mine that kind of did a 180 and said, okay, now I know what I'll do. I will go and I will join the Marines and I will save people instead of shooting them. I didn't end up going into the military. I couldn't pass the physical. But I did become a physician. I was a pre-med at Stanford, which was a wonderful time to go to Stanford, to be in California.
That'd be a big culture change for you, going from Indiana to Northern California too.
Yeah, and everybody told me I shouldn't do it. And it was another similar moment because I'd never been to California. The furthest away I'd been had been to a meeting on the East Coast when I was in high school, and it was like in and out. I had read about Stanford University in the Funk and Wagnalls Encyclopedia. There was no Google in those days. I said, man, this looks great. It's like it's on the West Coast. It was great. It was this, that, and the other. And so I wrote about, wrote them, got the application, and those, there was no FedEx, and you had regular snail mail, and that was it. And got the application, read everything there was about it. I applied to about 4 or 5 schools, and I got in. And my dad said, no, you're not going to Stanford. You're going to the University of Chicago, which was right up the road from Indianapolis. So we went and visited University of Chicago, and all I can remember about it was that it was gray, inside and out, that the guys on Friday night were sitting outside their rooms in the dorm talking about physics. And there were no girls. I said
and an 18-year-old Maya.
No, I was actually 16. So I said to myself, I'm not sure Chicago is the right choice for me. And at Stanford, we lived in the first co-ed dorm of the university. It was called a sandwich dorm because there were three floors. The girls were in the middle, guys were on the bottom and the top. Yeah. Everything that the old folks complained about that might happen in the dorm happened in the dorm. Yeah. This was the 70s, and so it was a great experience. Great experience. I wouldn't give it up for anything. I became fascinated by science. I became fascinated by the policy issues surrounding healthcare. I became fascinated with computers. I took the first class offered at Stanford called Computers in Medicine. That was the name of the class, and I remember loving it and knowing that I wanted to do something in my career that sort of encompassed all of those elements that I had been exposed to as an undergraduate. I was very fortunate to get admitted to medical school at Harvard, and that was an incredible 4-year experience where I got to see some of the best medicine practiced in the world at the time. I had opportunities to meet some of the most impressive professors, and I saw some of the most difficult cases that one can see, and I was exposed to blatant racism virtually my entire time in Boston. It's interesting because Boston likes to think of itself as a liberal city. But that was not my experience in that city. I was there. There's a famous picture of a guy holding a United States flag and spearing someone who wanted to, I think, go to school. And let's just say it was quite challenging to be young and African American in that city. But from a medicine standpoint, from a hospital standpoint, it was the best experience a person could have who wanted to go into the profession. Yeah.
So your father was in the military. Did your mother also work, or?
My mom was a school teacher.
Okay.
She was. We were in Indianapolis at the time that federal judge Hugh Dillon made the decision that Indianapolis schools must desegregate. And the court battle was long and hard fought, but the decision was made. My mother was chosen as the person to actually do the desegregation plan for Indianapolis Public Schools. Wow. So she was the one who decided who got bused where, when, and how, and what schools, what the impact was going to be on each school. So looking back on that, now fully understand the anxiety that she felt, the pressure that she felt. In those days, there was no private phone number. Your phone number was published. And you didn't sort of change your phone number like you do every day. There was no *67. I mean, there was just, your phone number was right there. And we would get calls at the house late at night, "Don't you dare bust my kid," and there'd be profanity, and then they would hang up, and then we'd get calls, "I absolutely want my kid bust too," and then they'd say what school they want. And she dealt with one of the most difficult issues of the day courageously. And I look back on it, and I'm so proud of what she was able to. And the judge, she had a direct line to the judge to cut out all the middlemen. The judge wanted to make sure it was done right, so he talked to her. And that's what she did until the end of her career.
Wow. So I ask everybody on the show, Dr. Myers, and as an entrepreneur and as a physician, I'd love to get your insight on whether you believe entrepreneurship is a function of nature versus nurture. Is it somewhat genetic? Is it learned? Is it a mixture of both? What do you think?
It's both. There's just zero doubt in my mind that you got to have a substrate to put it on, i.e. a mind that's capable of making the decisions on who to trust and doing the calculation on how much to do, how much this or that should be, and so it's quantitative, it's qualitative, it's communication. So there's the nurture part as well. You've got to learn those skills somewhere, and I was very fortunate, as I've explained, to have a two-parent home that where I got all kinds of different skills I had exposure to and learned from. So I think it's got to be both.
Okay. So switching gears a little bit, you've done a lot in your career, and you talked a little bit about the adversity you've gone through. Specifically, it sounded like Boston, there was some adversity. Obviously, the adversity of you traveling across the country, never really going to different places, going to Stanford, going to medical school. In your career so far, what has been kind of the largest obstacle or barrier you've had to overcome throughout your process?
The largest obstacle and barrier is probably internal, and it's the constant fight I have with myself. Am I doing as much as I can as fast as I can? I have been very fortunate that I sort of came along at a time when doors were opening, and I feel very fortunate that I was able to take advantage of opportunities that should have been available to generations before me, and are unfortunately, I think, in some respects, less available today than they were when I came through in the 70s. I had very few excuses that I could make, and so for me it was, well, why didn't you do better? Why didn't you do more? Why didn't you get that thing done faster, or whatever it was? I think that has been for me the most significant challenge, is to giving myself a break, because we're only on this earth for what, 70 to 80 years, and you only have a window this large that you can get things done in, and I want to try to pack as much into that experience that we call life as I possibly can, and to do as much good for as many people for as long as I can.
Sure.
And because I have been given opportunities and gifts that other people haven't been given, and it's my obligation, my duty, my responsibility to both share and to teach.
Yeah.
To do everything I can to make sure others are allowed to get their dreams met, if possible, if they have the skill set to do it. But at the same time, to eliminate the tremendous unfairness, the disparities in the way people are treated on the basis of gender, the basis of race, the basis of geography, the basis of religion and educational status, and on and on and on and on, when those barriers don't make us really any different as people. I mean, as a medical student, I liked surgery because it showed what was inside of us all, and it was very clear to me that the appendix of an African American person and the appendix of an Asian person and the appendix of a Caucasian person pretty much looked the same. And appendicitis pretty much presented in the same way. And but the way those people were treated when they presented to the emergency room was different. Why was that? Who said that should be different? Why aren't we treating all of the appendicitis that comes into the ER the same way?
Yeah.
That was always the issue for me.
Okay. Okay. So let's, you're relatively new to Arizona, and lots going on in Blue Cross Blue Shield. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Blue Cross, some of the priorities? It aligns with what you just said, I think, about relieving disparities, health disparities, and kind of looking at how we deliver care differently. So could you share some of that?
Absolutely. Blue Cross Blue Shield is a tremendous place right now. There's lots of excitement. There's a buzz. We are fortunate that we have a board of directors that certainly understands our mission and our place in the state of Arizona, and has recognized that there's a new team that's wanting to do things differently and wanting to aggressively pursue new opportunities. And they've given us the go-ahead. They've said, put your foot on the gas, move into fourth gear. And so that's what we're trying to do. Within the area of the company that I have responsibility, called Healthcare Quality Assurance, our job is to make sure our members get all the care they need, but only the care that they need, and to make sure that they get it at the right price, and that we are monitoring all of the activities surrounding quality and cost in the appropriate ways, in a partnership with the member, his or her physician, and the hospitals that provide the care when required. But very importantly, that we are good stewards of the funds that are being provided by the employers, who are very worried because healthcare costs continue to go up. As of today, the percentage of the gross domestic product that's dedicated to health is almost 20%. Probably will cross 20% by most indications quite soon, and that's a lot of money. For the employer that wants to provide a health care benefit to his employees, it's becoming more challenging. And you can only do so much with deductibles and co-pays and various restrictions. At some point, you've got to rethink how health care is being delivered and rethink what are the methods that we can eliminate non-value added care and the costs associated with it. And there have been a number of studies, Justin, that have shown over the past decades that up to 30% of the care, the health care that's provided, doesn't really add value. So why do we do it? Well, some of it is habit, some of it is patient demand, some of it is I think, aggressive marketing, and there are a lot of different ways you can make sure a person stays healthy and spend less money and not hurt that person's healthcare outcomes. And so part of what we're excited about at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona is finding new and better ways to do that. And to do that, we've got to have much better IT. I tell everybody, we are IT. Information technology is no longer optional. It is absolutely mandatory. And as much information as we can get in our smartphones and use every day, the better off we're going to be, both as a company and as members and as physicians. And so we're making huge investments in our company and improving our technology and getting it to the point where the information that we need to do our jobs every day, to learn about healthcare, to make decisions about healthcare, as much of that as possible goes right to the smartphone and allows us to access it quickly and act quickly. So there's a lot of work that goes into making that successful. One of the major activities that we're engaged in is what we call value-based care. Think about it this way. In the old days, you paid for health care by the piece. You saw the physician, you had a cold or the flu, and you paid for the visit afterwards. The physician gave you a prescription or told you what to do. That was the way of the world. And before that, you didn't use money. In the old days, you used chickens and other things, bartering system to pay for it. But today, that makes less and less sense. Plus, it provides, unfortunately for some, an incentive to do more than is required. And the pricing issues are tough today because people want to raise prices, and it's not a marketplace where you know what things should cost. I mean, we all know how much a can of Coca-Cola should cost. And we see the prices all the time, and you're not going to pay more than X for that because you've seen it for that price elsewhere. Now, sometimes you're on the road, you get a little gas station and you're thirsty and you know they're going to charge you a little bit more, and you'll do that. But when you're in the grocery store, you're at Costco, you're at Walmart, you know what to pay. Tell me how much an appendectomy should cost.
No transparency.
Tell me how much a treatment of a glioblastoma should cost.
No transparency.
There are very few ways to know what those procedures should cost. And even though there are a lot of websites and companies that want you to believe that they can tell you what it is, if you're a 40-year-old guy with disease X and a 60-year-old guy with disease X, it's going to present differently. And completely differently if you're an 80-year-old guy with disease X. And then there are complications, and then there are comorbidities, and then there are drugs that you can take or you can't take, and on and on and on. Medicine is not simple. Yeah. You can't Google up an answer. No. It still requires a human being to figure out sort of the right thing to do for that patient at that time. So that information gap is what we help manage for all of our interest groups and all of our customers. We have the physician as a customer, the hospital as a customer, the employer as a customer, and the member as a customer. And we're regulated in what we say and do by the federal government, by the state government, by local government, and by the ethics of our profession. Yeah. So we got all of these rules, all of these different parties, all of whom kind of sort of want the same thing, but they don't want it in the same way, and some want to get more for it, and some want us to get less for it, and that's the role that we, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona, play. We help to organize all of that chaos and put your name on a card that allows you to then walk into the hospital when you need to get the care that you or your loved one should get, and to get all of the care you need and only the care you need in a quality way. That's what we do.
It's a heck of a job with a lot of complexity, and I'm so glad you shared that, because I'm sure it happens to you too. You're in the community and people always say, what's going on? Why is healthcare so difficult, or it costs so much, or why can't we just simplify? Other places do. And what you just verbalized is how complex our system really is. And I think you were telling me you guys manage, is it 1.5 million people in that system?
There are 1.5 million folks that have a Blue Cross card of some sort in the state of Arizona. We are I think we're the first or second largest state in terms of what we call the snowbirds. Those folks whose card might say Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Hampshire or Vermont or Minnesota, who seem to find their way over here into our state at certain points of the year. So because there's so much of that kind of travel to our state, we have a lot of Blue Cross members from other states. Yeah. So it's a challenging population to manage, and of course, each state has its own rules that they don't do it the same way in Minnesota as they do in Wisconsin. The Packers and the Vikings don't play ball the same way. The Minnesota and Wisconsin don't have the same rules, so it's different.
So you've been in corporate medicine for a while, and transitioning from and kind of understanding some of your background, what advice would you give to somebody that's watching this podcast that is aspiring to make change in the system that you just described? It's so complex. There's so many systems. There's a level of bureaucracy in larger organizations that exist sometimes, and you have people that may want to be change agents. That the whole podcast was relentless mentality and so forth. So what advice would you give to somebody that's in a corporate medicine position, whether it's a medical director, whether it's somebody that is in an executive role, or it's somebody that's just starting off in a health insurer or a large organization? What advice would you give them?
Know who you are and what you want to get done, and know your own ethical standards, because they will be challenged every single day. And know that line for you, and know when you're getting close to it, and know to never cross it. Yeah. Because, as I said, there are all kinds of different interests, and you have to balance those interests. You have to balance the ethics of the profession with the law, with the policies, with the desires of your customers, with all these various folks that want you to think about and do things differently. And you have to know when to say yes and know when to say no. And when you say no, you have to mean it and be willing to sacrifice your job if you have to. And that's what I tell everybody who is a physician and who is involved in this aspect of healthcare. You have to be willing to walk away if you're being asked to cross that line. I've known some guys that have crossed the line and regretted it every single day, and they look back on that moment where they made that decision or those sets of decisions, and it eats at them because they said no when they should have said yes, or they said yes when they should have said no. I just never want to be in those shoes. I never want to be there, and so I know where my line is, and I know when I'm getting close to it, and I know never to cross it.
So on that, what would you say was your biggest aha moment where, through your career, you know, you've been at large systems, Blue Cross, Anthem, Ford Motor Company, excuse me. Where was that biggest aha moment where you're like, you know what, this is really where I've really moved the needle, or I've made the biggest impact? Or
I remember very clearly when I was a commissioner of health for the state of Indiana back in the 80s, and everyone was worried about what we then called the virus of HTLV3, which soon became HIV. It was the virus that caused AIDS, and there was literally a panic across the nation about what this was, how it was transmitted, how easy it was to go from one human being to another. We knew a lot of things about it, but we certainly didn't know anywhere near as much then as we know today. And as health commissioner, one of your responsibilities, among thousands of different responsibilities, is to help make decisions about when is a child too sick to go to school? Who makes that decision? Well, in Indiana in those days, it was the local health department. When I became health commissioner, the state health department was advisory only, and the local health department made the decision. The law was changed a few years later, but we had a kid that lived in Kokomo, Indiana, who had the disease hemophilia and had acquired the virus because in those days the blood products that you used to treat hemophilia weren't as purified and cleaned as they are today. And he got a very bad case of HIV, of AIDS, and his confidentiality had been compromised. The folks in his city knew about it. And his health department, local health commissioner, who was a pediatrician, did not want him to go to school. And when I talked to the pediatrician, I said, come on, man, what's going on? You know that it's not transmitted by casual contact. It's not the kind of thing that you're, you know, unless this 12-year-old boy is going to have unprotected sex regularly in the boys' room, what are we worried about? And he said, yeah, I know that you're telling me the truth, and I know that that's not the problem, but there's so much fear around here. And I remember he told me this sort of sadly, and I can hear it in his voice, there's so much fear around here, if I let him back in school, I'm going to lose my patients. And so you're telling me you're not going to do the right thing from a public health standpoint because you're worried about the economic consequences. And he said, yep, that's it. And that's when I said, well, I cannot live with that answer. I've got to do something different. So long story short, after consultation with the governor's office, I met with the young man and his mother. I met them at the airport. They were coming back from a trip, and I said, we would like to help you. We, the state of Indiana, want to be on your side. We want to do the right thing, and we want to make the right thing happen. And long story short, we held a press conference. The kid's name was Ryan White. And we held a press conference, and every camera in the state of Indiana, it seemed like, was at that press conference. And so Ryan was on one side of me, his mom was on the other side of me, and I wanted to, and I don't remember all the things I said, but you know, this is what the disease was, what the science was, what the CDC was saying, but what I wanted the cameras to see was, I said something funny to Ryan, and I put my hand on his head, and I scruffed his hair. You know, he's a 12-year-old boy. You can do that sort of thing. Because I wanted people to see that I would touch him. And if the state health commissioner of Indiana touches somebody with HIV and is not worried about it, then theoretically the public would think, well, then why should I be worried about it? Looking back on it, that's kind of when the tide began to turn. And all those public activities started to become public, not just in Indiana, but sort of around the world. And then Ryan, next thing you know, was friends with Michael Jackson, and was friends with Elton John, and was being flown to New York to see plays, and he and his mom were just having all kinds of great things happen in the sense of people wanting to support this little kid who wanted to go to school.
Yeah.
And I remember they moved at the sort of the end of the school year, and we said to ourselves, well, we got all summer. to help the new school district get ready. And the AIDS coordinator that we had at that time did a fantastic job, worked with that school district, worked with the parents, and on the first day of school, not only was every camera in America there, but the student council president came out to meet Ryan and hugged him. Everybody was happy that he was there. It was a joyous celebration, completely the opposite of what had happened in Kokomo, completely the opposite. And our governor at the time, who, by the way, was the oldest governor in America and a Republican, but who cared deeply about his state and hired a Democrat to be his health commissioner, and allowed us to do that because it was scientifically correct and it was correct for the citizens of his state. Our governor should get all the credit in the world because all the pressure was on him to stop the health department from doing this dastardly thing that was going to kill babies and kill kids. And in fact, what we did and what happened instead was that ABC News made Ryan the person of the week. The governor went up and gave a speech at the school thanking the school. That got a lot of positive publicity. We created an award for each kid in the school, Health in the Heartland Award. I mean, it turned, we turned lemons into lemonade.
Wow.
And that, I think, was a really important moment for me because it helped me to understand if you live by your convictions and you get the help you need and you run the traps you have to run, you could possibly win.
So I'm sitting here kind of in awe because we've done so many of these different filmings, and most people's aha moment is something about their biggest career success or something has to do with them, and that story is amazing. Like that Ryan White connection is absolutely amazing. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
That's I hope everybody heard how influential one decision can be to really make a massive change. So, all right. So Dr. Myers, I'm going to give you the lightning round of the last 3 questions.
All right.
And so, and it's really all about inspiration. So what are you most proud of?
Well, I'm very proud of my kids and what they're doing and what they've done, how they turned out. You know, every father has moments with his daughter and son, of course, and my daughter was particularly stubborn when she was adolescent, and I remember saying one day, I hope you have a daughter just like you, and I got, my wish has come true, and I hear her saying exactly the same things to her daughter that I said to her. That's a joyous moment for me.
Okay. Who inspires you?
Oh my gosh, Sheriff Joe Clark.
Okay.
Sheriff Joe Clark was a sheriff in Mississippi who, during the Civil Rights era, told the fire department to turn the hoses on the people who were trying to register to vote and trying to protest peacefully. And the whole Civil Rights movement really got its major motion, I think, when the television cameras showed the horror of those moments. And I remember so clearly an unnamed young man, as all the other people were being blown away by these very powerful hoses and hurt, he held on to a street lamp and just held on and held on and held. He was the last guy there because he was not going to let that hose stop him. And I was thinking it would have been so much easier for him to just let go and retreat. But for him, it was important to demonstrate that this decision to release these fire hoses on people, like including his grandmother and his mom, and to then release the dogs, the police dogs, to attack them, was not going to deter him from fighting for his rights. And I looked at that and I said, damn, nobody's got a fire hose turned on me. Nobody has sicked dogs on me. All I got to do is go to school and try to make some good grades and speak up and communicate what I believe is right. I mean, that's a lot easier than getting a fire hose and dogs sicked on you and your mom. So I look back on that as a very important moment.
Wow, it's relentless. So last one, what motivates you now to get out of bed in the morning?
As long as I'm doing something every day that's important, And the more important it is, the more eager I am to get up and do it. As long as I feel like I'm fulfilling my responsibilities, my obligations, I'm allowed to breathe oxygen every day. I should pay a price for doing that, and my price for doing that is to go as far as I can, as fast as I can, as long as I can. And if I feel like I'm having the opportunity that day to do that, that's what I will do.
Dr. Myers, welcome to Arizona. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
all you're doing. We're lucky to have you here and look forward to seeing how you use that same mentality at Blue Cross Blue Shield to really change healthcare in our state in the future. So thank you so much for your time, and we
Appreciate it, sir.
you coming on. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw today, please subscribe in the links below. And remember, never to quit, always be relentless.